Good evening, Senator Galvez.
Hello, Linda.
Thank you so much for joining us. Such a pleasure to have you. And Senator Galvez, I just want to give a little context for those of you who are coming on this call to tell you what Senator Galvez has been doing, what she's been absorbed in, and why I feel like she is such a great person to talk with about these topics. So, Senator, you served on the Standing Senate Committee on Energy, the Environment, and Natural Resources, and you were its chair between 2017 and 2019. You've served on the Standing Senate Committee on National Finance since 2020. So that's really it in a very brief nutshell. There's much more to you, and we'll, talk about some of that. But I'd like to jump right in with a question for you, which is, what have you learned about making change through government and public service during these years you've served?
Thank you for the question. We are progressing and we are in the right direction, but we are not going at the appropriate pace. We are moving in a snail pace and we are not ambitious enough. And there is no enough accountability. The objective and the goals that we said we are going to attain are not attained. So something is grown. And we need to figure it out what is grown so we can redress and jump into the race to net zero before 2050.
Well, that is spot on for what's been on my mind a lot, and some of reporting we've been getting into and trying to bring to the public's attention something I think most of us know about, but we may forget about, and that's the role of lobbying, and in particular lobbying by the fossil fuel industry. And I wanted to ask you, as someone who is in the middle of it, how do you see oil and gas lobbyists? Are they having an impact on climate policy in Ottawa?
What I can tell you is that along my 37 years of career, environmental regulation has impacted the career of engineers. And while exercising the profession of engineering, I didn't know that the regulations were a result of stakeholder discussions with the government, where there was a big imbalance of the people participating in these consultations. When I joined the Senate, some of the ideas that I had of the influence and the impact of lobbyists in making regulation overwhelmed my imagination. So unfortunately, the environmental regulation is not preventing pollution. It's not, even though in the preambles and in the principle, everybody think that environmental regulation is to prevent pollution, including the pollution of the atmosphere. It is not. It's abatement. We are legalizing, we are accepting pollution, going into water, going into the land, going into the air. Why is that? There are several reasons, but I think that mostly is because the people that have a stronger presence is people from the big corporation, polluter corporations, and they come with a big group of lawyers, ready-made amendments, and they dominate the dialogue. So one thing that we are trying to do is to balance and to open up these stakeholders discussions and bring up other worries and other priorities, and making sure that we are doing prevention, because prevention is the cheapest way. There is no better, no more efficient way of attenuating pollution by preventing it. So yeah, and we can go in detail of what is the lobbying situation in Ottawa.
So if I just understood you, what you said was that paradoxically, regulations aren't really effective in stopping pollution when they're meant to regulate. At least on the surface, they seem there to be there to regulate pollution, but in fact, they are not there for that reason. That's not how those regulations come out. And I wonder if you can tell me, so you've referred to lawyers and groups of lawyers, and I'm assuming these lawyers are lobbyists. As a senator and as a chairman of a committee, how are you approached by these lobbyists?
They have to fill up a registry. So every lobbyist that come to Ottawa needs to write down that he or she, they are coming and how long they stay with us and what were the subjects that they were taught. What is interesting to know for the people, for the citizen, is that when the government puts a bill, there has been some upstream consultation. Sometimes this is a wide consultation and every stakeholder has the opportunity to participate, but not all the time. Sometimes we think that, or the government have this tendency to think that the industry, the sector that is going to be regulated has more experience, has expertise. And so therefore they know more. And also with time, we have seen a reduction of the expertise, scientific expertise, and or specialities in the ministers. So there is no enough knowledge to compensate for what the knowledge of the industry comes. I can give you an example. This is what happened during the Lac Mégantic accident. So the government relied on the industry of transport of hazardous substances, in this case, petroleum, to auto-regulate themselves. So the policy just give general framework, and then the regulations come, and the regulations are the government talking with the industry, and then the government leaving the industry to auto-regulate themselves. But I find that that is putting the industry in a conflict of interest, because they have to reduce the cost. And so where they are going to reduce the cost in order to increase benefit is in the security, it's in the material, it's in the quality, and it's in the time, it's in the, and so therefore, what happened in Lac Mégantic is that the number of wagons that could be carried in a convoy passed from 50 to 200. You know, the number of drivers of the locomotive passed from 4 to 1. And that we allowed these convoys
so you mean they actually reduced regulation. They made the problem worse. Is that?
Well, what happened is that deregulate, meaning, yes, facilitating the transport of hazardous substances. And that is something that we see in many other areas. So because we need to do cost benefit, we have to cut expenses. And most of the time this cut is the corporation, the industry that does it. And they will cut it in those areas.
I just want to be sure I really understood this right. So are you saying that afterwards they were actually able to bring more oil cars through than they had been before? It went from 50 to 200, did you say?
Yes.
And they were able to do that with fewer drivers?
Yes.
And did the people of Lac Mégantic ever have anything to say about that?
No. Mm-hmm. Another thing is that this MMA, that the company was supposed to have an emergency plan, a contingency plan.
Right. And
they didn't have it. And this plan was supposed to be approved by the government, by the transport, the Safety Transport Board, and it was not. They didn't have. Another thing is that they were supposed to know what was the substance that was being transported, how dangerous it was, but this information was not available. So the firefighters went a little bit blind in fighting this fire. So this is the situation. And this, of course, after the accident happened, of course, you know, government hurries to redress the situation. And 50 plus sort of executive order were given in order to very fast redress the situation. But it's the same thing in many places. Take, for example, the tailing ponds in the oil sands. It's exactly the same situation. So we have given the responsibility of the industry to auto-regulate, to decide by themselves what is good for their residues. So they just go and accumulating these tailing ponds.
It's so interesting what you're saying. And if I'm hearing you right, what you're describing is that after that, you know, major catastrophe of the oil trains exploding, instead of things getting better, they actually got a bit worse with on the regulatory level, and also in the tailings ponds. And it's kind of like this sense of like slippage, like instead of going forward, going backwards. And, you know, bringing that back to climate policy and lobbying, can you just tell us how you are observing the fossil fuel lobby in Ottawa, and is it part of why we're not moving forward?
It's the big factor. When there is environmental regulation, we have the visit, it's a peak of visit from lobbyists from the fossil fuel. They come, as I said, with many lawyers. And sometimes, for example, I can give you the example for C-69, which was the modernization of the Impact Assessment Act. They came with 180 amendments written by lawyers. And they just, is like, you know, we are swamped into—
Senator, can you unpack that a little bit? Like, just remind us about what that bill was and why they took trouble to get 186 amendments, how was that, like in a binder? Like what does that look like?
Yeah, exactly. It looked like a binder. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So this C-69 was the modernization of the impact assessment. It replaced the Environmental Impact Assessment Act. So when you have projects, the federal government commands an environmental impact assessment. Today we call it just impact assessment because it's not just environmental, it's economical, it's technical. And so in this act, it is determined what are the aspects that needs to be studied, and if there is any attenuation or and if there are going to be serious impact or negligible impacts. Like, for example, for Bedu Nord, they say that the impacts are going to be negligible, and therefore the project is accepted, you know.
So the lobbyists say the impacts are going to be negligible? No,
it is the proponents, the promoters.
Yeah, the promoters of the project.
Okay. Yeah, the promoters of the project, and it's a bit of negotiation with the government, the details of what is going to be in the impact evaluation. So yeah, so during this time, the modernization of this act, we had a lot of visit from lobbyists from the oil and gas, and of course they wanted it to have exceptions to their projects. For example, they also raised concern about how cumulative effects were going to be studied. They wanted to give more weight to the economic aspects of a project, and they wanted also to take away the the importance it was given to the indigenous consultations. And we had a big discussion about the UNDRIP, the United Declaration of Indigenous Peoples' Rights, in order to have their informed prior consent to build projects. So yeah, so they come and they suggest these amendments, and a senator or a MP can accept them and present in their name, or they can present it as theirs too.
Mm-hmm. And what happens when they feel like an important senator or, you know, MP is not going along with their agenda?
It's interesting. Well, by now, you know, they know each senator and each MP, and I'm sure that they have us classified in the, and I have talks with CAPs, not very often, but we talk. I think that it's because they want to know what is my position and what I'm planning to do in order to, you know, attenuate their lobbying efforts. And I want to know how bad are their amendments or the changes that they want to do. Mm-hmm. And so we have established a civilized conversation with them. Mm-hmm. But of course, you know, depending on your political ideology, you will be more inclined to accept some of their amendments.
Mm-hmm. And I just want to stress that, you know, lobbying is legal as long as you register. And, you know, this is all part of, you know, what is sanctioned under the law. But in your experience, how does it work in terms of, you know, say we've got a project on the table like Beta Noor, and environmentalists believe that it is the wrong direction for the government to go when we're trying to achieve net zero by 2030, or at least by 2050. Who has the biggest voice?
So with time, I have realized that it is very common for the government and then for promoters to claim that the project is for economical reasons. And it's a lever, it's a leverage. It's an economic lever that will help a given province or a given region to create more work, to more jobs, to bring revenue. And so we don't ask the preliminary question, the upstream question, which is, why, if we need money, revenue, or jobs, why it needs to be a fossil fuel project and cannot be a renewable energy project, or, you know, another type, or a tourism project, or so there are so many other kinds of projects. But it's like upstream, the promoters are very much interested in this type of project, which doesn't align with our climate commitments. So let me tell you something that recently happened in the National Finance Committee when we were discussing about the budget and the money and the budget. And so I asked the officials why we were putting money into Beta Noor and into the platforms and in the ocean in front of the Newfoundland, when that province, that same province, had this other project called Muskrat Falls, which is to produce hydroelectric power, which is clean energy. And they didn't have an answer for that. In fact, they told me that they were not familiar with these two projects. When in the news the days before, it was in the first page. So I think that we don't ask enough upstream the question, what is the type of economic development that we want? And therefore, we are putting still all our eggs in the same basket, which is the fossil fuel industry. And so the flow cash are still going in that direction. And when you see the banks, and when you see our 5 big banks, they put the money into fossil fuel, and only very little drops goes into clean energy, low carbon economy. And that's why we are progressing a very, very slow pace.
And I want to get more into that in just a moment. But first, I want to ask you a question that comes from Canada's National Observer's Ottawa reporter, one of our Ottawa reporters, Natasha Bulowski. And Natasha asks, what paths exist to reduce the clout of the fossil fuel lobby? What kinds of legislative changes could be made? And does change need to come from designated public office holders refusing meetings? How do you see that?
Absolutely. We have to find ways of having a more democratic way of consultation with all stakeholders. I know that traditionally people equate energy with fossil fuels. Whoever speaks about energy, everybody in their imagination, they just imagine oil, petroleum, gas. Today, that's not the reality. The reality is we have energy coming from hydroelectric in different forms, hydraulic, eolian, solar, nuclear, biomass. And so we have to stop thinking that energy is just coming from fossil fuels. We need transparency, more transparency. There is a lot of conflict of interest. Very recently, there was a report from the think tank Shift saying that out of 10 pension plan investors boards, 7 of them had members of boards sitting simultaneously in the pension plan board and the fossil fuel corporations. So if you have the people taking decisions of funding and investing wearing 2 hats, where the fiduciary duties are completely different, of course there is conflict of interest. One focusing on the short-term profits, and the other that should think in the young workers that are putting their money and that expect to have a pension not tomorrow, but in 20 years. Now, these people that sit in these boards simultaneously with almost opposite fiduciary duties should have the ethics to recuse themselves when they take decisions. Unfortunately, it's not mandatory to declare this conflict of interest. Maybe the rules doesn't say that they have to have these disclosures, and therefore there is a lot of room to change this situation and bring transparency to the table of decision making when it touches funding and investment.
And is the Canadian pension plan one of those pension plans you're referring to?
Yes.
So they have oil industry executives on the board.
Yep.
Many?
Well, they say at least one out of one in 7 out of 10 boards. That's the thing. I invite everybody to read this report. It's extremely interesting. While I was doing consultation for my bill, we heard some of these things, And again, I think I'm still very naive. I really think I'm very naive because I think I have a sense that things are happening, but it's like a shower, a cold shower, because the magnitude of these things, it's always, I cannot believe it. And I am in shock.
I know what you mean. So tell us about your bill.
Okay, so the COVID gave us a lot of time to reflect, and we want to build forward better. I wrote a white paper about that. We don't want to fall in debt. We worry about the debt we are leaving to future generations. So we have to create revenue. From where we create revenue? Stopping subsidies, for example, to the fossil fuel. Adopting the sustainability revolution that is happening everywhere in the world, a very fast pace, except in Canada. And we heard about this conflict of interest. So our bill tries to solve these issues. And we want to align the financial institutions and federally regulated entities that contribute to the investment and the in Canada to align with our national and international climate commitments. So I was the sponsor of Net Zero 2050. That's a bill that was had a royal assent last summer. And so this bill, my bill, the aligning finances with climate commitment, S243, is a logical consequence of that. So it's making it happen, because Net Zero 2050 looks too far, and we cannot afford to come at 2049 and say, oh, we have to get it down. We have to organize this transition, and it has to be in order. It cannot be chaotic. It has to be. And the bill tries to bring stability to both the climate and the financial system. Right now, the financial system is in a conundrum. The banks and the pension plans and some crown corporations, they are in this cul-de-sac crossroads. On one hand, they worry a lot about the climate-related risk because of the extreme weather events that are coming more frequent and destructive. They also worry that the technology is changing, and then it's going to be a lot of stranded assets. They worry about the policy that is changing and will discourage some sectors and will encourage other sectors. And so they know that this risk is there. They should have been disclosing this risk. I believe that disclosing it is not enough. Disclosing that there is risk, we all already know that the risk is higher. We already know that the risk is systemic because climate change is impacting everywhere, everyone. It's a systemic risk. On the other hand, this same financial system keeps fueling the climate crisis because they are investing in fossil fuels. So they call it double materiality. They are in the middle, and on one hand, they are scared of this risk and they have to manage it. On the other hand, they are fueling the climate crisis. So my bill brings alignment on this situation in order to have a coordinated orderly transition.
Your bill sounds brilliant. Can you explain to us, however, what is the process when you create a bill in the Senate? Like, how does it work? And what are the obstacles you face in getting it passed?
So we knew that this is a delicate subject. And usually, I think this type of bill should have been brought by the government. But we couldn't wait it more. We know that there is a certain level of capture, regulatory capture by the fossil fuel of federal regulation for all of what we talked before. So what we decided to do is go into consultations with a variety of stakeholders, investors, sustainable finance division of banks, pension plans, ENGOs, ONGOs, and asked what were the problems. And we identified the 7 problems that we just discussed. And we had the opportunity to work with an academics that are in sustainable, expert in sustainable finances. And we had also the, through them, we had the assistance of the Trottier Family Foundation that helped us also in organizing these consultations. And with that, we worked and we wrote this bill. Now, this bill has to pass in the Senate. It goes through debate, a first debate on the principles of the bill. Then it will go to a committee, normally the banking committee. Then it will come back in chamber for another sort of debate. And then after it will be sent to the other place, the other house, House of Commons, where it will follow exactly the same process. Maybe it will be amended. To be very honest with you, we have already attained several of the objectives, because the first objective was to have this discussion. And the bill has received overwhelming support. We have endorsement of 90 plus institutions. And because they were already living all these problems of conflict of interest, of regulatory capture, of not attaining the objectives, greenwashing. And also another one is not having climate science expertise, not having clean technology expertise in the decision boards. So how these boards supposed to take good decisions when they don't? Maybe they are even climate deniers. Who knows? Because there is no climate science in there. How can they equate energy else than fossil fuels when there is no an expert in energy in these boards? So, so we know that that objective is attained. The discussion is ongoing. There is no day, I would say, that a news are in the media talking about the different aspect that my bill touches. And so nobody is saying we don't need this. What we need to happen is that they will say, we are moving. Maybe this is not the right way. Okay, I'm open to amendments. Tell me if there is a more efficient way, but this is the way Europeans are going. I cannot say, oh, wow, this is a great idea that I had it all by myself. No, this is already happening in Europe. And I just came back from Washington and I just got the confirmation that the Securities Exchange Commission of US is going to mandate that everybody declares climate disclosure and presents a plan on how to address this risk of climate-related risk. So they are moving in that way.
Really? So they're going to require American companies to disclose plans for dealing with climate change.
Yes, everybody that it's trades in the Securities Exchange Commission through them, and it will affect, I would say, thousands of corporations in Canada. Because
and that's not a political. That's not a political. The Securities Exchange, is that apolitical?
Good question. I don't think I cannot answer that question. It's a regulator.
Yes.
It's a financial regulator.
Right, right.
And you can see in YouTube the chair, the president, and explaining why they are doing this. And actually, this just happened few days ago, and when I listened to his video, I was so proud that I said, well, this is what we are saying here too. So so this is encouraging, and actually all of this is less what is happening in Europe. In Europe, they have a green taxonomy. My bill is technology agnostic. We are not saying use this technology or use that technology. We are saying align with our commitments, our national commitments and our international commitments. So we have the UN Framework for Climate Change Convention. We have the Paris Agreement. Last time in Glasgow, we have the Glasgow Alliance. So we have all of these commitments internationally. And now we have the Net Zero 2050 Act that passed last year. So align, tell us how are you going to attain this goal, and base your targets in science.
You know, a lot of people, that's all real. I just want to stop and say that that's so exciting and wonderful that you've managed to do that. And, you know, it'll be really interesting to see how that bill works its way forward and how, you know, can it be passed? That would be so good. I'm just wondering though, like, you know, what kind of, again, like, what do you expect to be confronted with in terms of opposition? Like, is the gas and oil industry right now figuring out how to water this down? And what tactics will they use? What do you expect? How does it happen? Like, I'm curious too, like, you know, how many lobbyists were there around Beta Nor? How many lobbyists will be around this from the gas and oil industry?
So the very, very short answer, I would say, because this is a question that many people have asked me, is that we all know the story of David and Goliath, and everybody tells me that I'm David, you know, everybody tells me. But I said, okay, so I'm David. But if I recall well, in that story, David wins. And David wins because I think that we are saying the right things and we are very coherent and we are based in science, we are based in the evidence. The IPCC reports every year tells this is the way to go. Everywhere else, they are going in that way, UK, Europe, whole Europe, and in individual countries like France, but New Zealand too. And even now in the States now, I told you about SEC, but there is also 2 new bills in the Senate right now that goes also in that direction. So the detractors of our bill really will have to think a lot on how to go against. And just to give you an example, I don't know if you followed the news a couple of days ago during a moral money panel, an HSBC executive went and said in public that the average length of a loan is 6 years. Probably he was meaning personal loans. So you, me, everybody that takes a loan. So he said, in average is 6 years. What happened at the 7th year, we don't care. He said that. He also said, we know that Miami is going to be underwater in some few years, but we don't care because Amsterdam is a very beautiful city and this. So if they want to come against our bill, they will have to come with better arguments than these type of arguments.
Senator, sorry to interrupt you. I have a bunch of questions that are coming in from the audience.
Yeah.
And I want to get to a few. We have about 15 minutes left.
That's true.
The first one is from Linda, not me. And Linda asks, when Senator Galvez says we, who is she including? How many senators are on side? Does she have a potential sponsor in the House?
Yes, yes. So yes, I have several supporters in the Senate. I cannot say exactly the numbers, but my group, the Independent Senator group, invited me to present my bill, and we had a very nice welcome and freshness. The comments that I heard from them is, this is what we need. This accomplishes transparency, accountability, clarity. This is absolutely needed. We say that this is something that the government must do as parliamentarians, because the private sector won't do it by itself. So I think that there is support. And of course, on the other house, 3 out of the 4 parties had elements of sustainable finance in their platforms, and we have received several propositions to sponsor my bill in the other place.
Okay. And this is from Laurel. Would it help you in your work to have something like Citizens Climate Lobby talking to MPs and senators about your ideas? And
absolutely.
She says, this is the group that lobbied the government about a climate tax.
Yes. Contact my office. You just find me Rosa Galvez Senate, and you're there. And we will be very, very happy to tell you. Also, in my website, we put a protocol that it describes to any citizen that wants to raise his voice how to do it. Because of what I said, we don't have the same strength and the same, some people have megaphones and they can speak louder and the common citizen can't. So we have put some ideas in my webpage on how to raise your voice and make it heard by the government.
Great. Here is a question from Meg, who asks, what opportunity does Senator Galvez see potentially to include a climate lens in S5 for alternatives assessment, restricting approvals to the safest options as Europe is advancing? This would include assessment and regulation of environmental agents like chemicals, including petrochemicals, with alternatives assessment, including essentiality and substitution for safest options.
Great idea. Yes, it's among some of the amendments that we are studying. S5 is the way we manage chemical substances. And, you know, it took 22 years for the government to modernize this legislation. So I hope that we take the time to really look at it and make it stronger.
Okay. And I'm just one more question coming in. I need to just make that bigger so I can read it. This little screen. Okay. I'm not sure who this comes from, but the question is, what opportunity do you see potentially to, oh, we already asked that. Okay. Sorry about that. So my next question is, you used to be an engineer, and didn't you used to work in the gas and oil lobby? I mean, sorry, industry.
Yes, well, one of my first job when I was a research assistant at McGill, one of my tasks was to extract oil from the oil sands. And we were giving alcohols, water, temperature were the factors that we needed to use in order to extract as much as possible. At that time, and I'm talking about now 30 years ago, we already reached a plateau. There was, because you have to make it cost effective. So that's why there is so much tailings. You know, they used to use 4 barrels of water per barrel of oil. Now they say they brought it down to 2 barrels of water for 1 barrel of oil. But still, you know, these tailings are there. And now with the climate change and all these rains and the dams holding those tailing ponds are presenting some level of risk. And they are saying we are going to discharge them in the river, in the Athabasca River. Well, this Athabasca River is the ecosystem providing with services to the indigenous people. So when we talk about cumulative effects, you know, I really want to know what exactly the government means by, because I don't know how can somebody think about doing this.
Well, you've really come a long way in your career from where you started to, you know, as an engineer then and as a senator today. And it sounds like you're really using your position as a senator in a way that not all senators do, which is to really strongly advocate for climate and environmental protections. And as our time comes to an end, I still feel that there is more to unpack about lobbyists. And I just wonder, what have I not asked you that I should have asked you about how it works, what citizens need to know about it, and how do we, you know, this feeling of like things aren't moving fast enough, why is it, you know, never happening? Why, when we know, can we not make change happen faster? Can you just address that as it pertains to lobbying?
Transparency, and we have to call it. When we know something is happening, we need to call it. I know that scientists now are also getting fed up, and they are now speaking about when fossil fuels fund their research, when fossil fuel deny science. So they started with denying, then, you know, doubting the science, then delaying the science. And now they are saying, yes, yes, but there is a lot of greenwashing. So it's like the lobbying approach evolves with time. And we need to keep up with this evolution so like we can call it out, because otherwise it just changes the form and then the lobbying keep existing. We are due again to modernize the Lobbying Act. We are due, and really we need to do this, and hopefully the government will do it. But if it doesn't, then I think the deputies or the senators must take the leadership and do it.
What is wrong? What is wrong with the Lobbying Act, in your opinion?
Oh, that's a big question. There are several things. As you said, it's legal, but there is no framework. There are no barriers. So it's just, right now, it's just a matter of who has more money to pay more lawyers. That it comes down to that. And that is so grown, you know, that is so grown. I just came back from the United States and everybody complains that who decides who's next to be elected is the sector and is the money. Yeah. We don't have that, and we don't want to get there. So we need to modernize our Lobbying Act.
So you're saying that the Lobbying Act is allowing big money to control our political policy?
Yeah. There is a book that opened my eyes called The Big Oil State by Taft. It's an ex-liberal who talks about it. And when I read that, again, I repeat myself, I was naive. I didn't know. We had in the Senate, the big oil man in the Senate. It was the news. I didn't know that. I read it. So I had a colleague that was a lawyer from the oil and gas industry. I didn't know that. And he's the one who proposed that TMX should be declared as national interest. Mm-hmm. You know? Mm-hmm. So it's not enough just declaring it. It really, and ethics have to put back as a value.
Let me ask you something else too, because when we're talking about the gas and oil industry, really we're talking about, you know, multinational industry where they're not, most of those companies are not Canadian. Are they also pouring money into lobbying in Canada? And is that, should that be allowed? What's the nuance of that? Because they operate in Canada for sure, but yeah, they're paying for a lot of lobbying. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. I think it's between 60 and 70% that is owned by foreign entities. And we have to go into the history of the oil sands to know that initially they were Canadian, but at the point they were sold to individuals, that they sold it to foreign. And of course, and that's why we don't have refineries for our oil. The refineries are in New Orleans, and that's why we have to build so many pipelines. So they didn't want to, to integrate the oil chain, which will give more value. And instead of selling our oil at such a cheap prices, we will have had other products. Just think about carbon fiber or other, not plastic because plastic is another problem. But yes.
Do you think that the proportion of money being spent on lobbying in Canada by the gas and oil industry, would proportionally be 60% of it is coming from companies that are not based in Canada?
I cannot tell you, but another proof of this situation is the amount of subsidies the government give to the oil and gas. And you can read that it's between 8 billion and 15 billion per year. And the reason because we don't know exactly is because they don't want to opt for a definition. But it is very, very high. And compared to other industries, take, for example, agriculture, doesn't receive this amount of subsidies. And so, yes, that's also, again, another proof of this power of the lobbying that it has. And right now, this sector, the fossil fuel sector, is making record profits and are still receiving so much billions of money. And the price of the gas is $2 the liter or the gallon. I don't remember the unit, but it's so high. It doesn't make sense.
So, so many interesting things coming together in this talk. Thank you so much. We're coming towards the end, but I have one more question, which is a comment and a question. I've read that you've said that you're very optimistic after your time in government. You're not, this has been a positive experience for you. And I wonder if you could just talk about that a little bit, talk about what we can do as ordinary people to have any impact at all on the situation with lobbying and moving climate policy faster. And any last words on that for us, Senator Galvez?
Yes, I remain positive because I've been in this area the last 37 years. And many times I feel alone in my corner. I have always followed UN and the climate change, so I knew. But in the last, I would say 10 years, it has been exponential, the growth towards this sustainability revolution, circular economy, net zero 2050, zero waste, aligning climate with climate change, sustainable finances. And so we have all these groups: doctors for the environment, nurses for the environment, pensions for the retirees for the environment, veterans for the environment, grannies for the environment, mothers for the environment. So they all write to us, they all contact, and I don't feel any more alone in my corner. And every time I see the faces of my grandchildren, I just cannot stop. And I'm sure, and I hope that everybody that has children, nephews, nieces, they see that they can contribute. We all, at our level, we can do something. And contact us and we will give you ideas if you don't have ideas.
And any last words about what we as ordinary citizens can do to help move along reforms of the Lobbying Act?
Yes, you can ask your representative, and I will suggest don't write an email because they receive tons of email. Write a letter, a normal letter that arrives that has to be open. Ask for a short answer. Provide your email. Call call and say, there is a lot of open houses, the Senate meets different groups, request and demand to do that. And yeah, I think there are, and of course, you know, think global, act locally, it's always there. We need to use more mass transport. We need to try to become independent, and we can do energy efficiency at our homes. There are so many things. Yeah, I go to my municipality and I ask them, show me the new lines of the flooding areas. What is your program in net zero waste? Circular economy, and I try to go, because just by raising the discussion, other people will raise awareness, and everybody gets to, okay, yes, this is important.
Senator Galvez, thank you so much. Like, I know we've been trying to connect with you for many, many months now, and I'm so glad that we finally got to, and it feels like the beginning of the conversation, not the end. There's so much to unpack about all this, and it's just been a real pleasure having you here tonight. So thank you so much. And to everyone else, I just want to also thank you for coming, and wherever you are in Canada. And I want to thank Mary Beth Dean, who produced tonight's event. And I want to thank Janelle Johnson, Shade Ertajvidi, and Sadie Stevens, who are here in the background helping us make this all happen. And most of all, I really want to thank our subscribers and all the amazing people who've been donating to our fundraising campaign. And I really mean that. Every time I see one of those donations, it just really encourages me, and I know I'm not alone. And so thank you, everybody. And in the fall, we're planning on having our events in person. We're hoping we can make that happen. And we hope to see you there. Senator, thank you again.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you very much.
Okay, bye-bye.
See you. Bye-bye.